Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Asher Marketing Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Asher Agency, a full-service marketing agency with offices in Indiana, West Virginia, and Washington, D.C. For nearly 50 years, Asher has helped our clients tell their stories, reach customers and prospects, and stand out from the crowd. To learn more about how we can help your company, visit asheragency.com or contact us at hello@asheragency.com. My guest is Randy Rusk. Randy, how are you doing?
I'm great.
Well,
it's wild to be back.
I know.
4 years.
4 years. You were, I think,
How'd that happen?
You were, I think, our fourth guest, if
right
my
there.
memory serves me well. And
We
it
could
was
scroll back in the YouTube library.
Yeah,
Right.
we're still winging it, but we were winging it even more at that time because it was in the middle of a pandemic and we had only done 3 of these. So.
Well, and you were still, when I was like, okay, what is this exactly? You're like, well, we're kind of.
Yeah. And Nick, our producer, who's off camera, his skills have improved exponentially. I'm still the same. I haven't gotten any better. So buckle up because it's going to be a fun ride. And you are on record as being one of the longer interviews. And I laugh because this is supposed to be the Asher Marketing Shortcast where we revisit a past guest. So we'll see if we can set the record for the longest shortcast. How's that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we only have one other one, so it's not going to take much.
Okay.
Well, thanks for coming back.
I'm ready.
Really interested in hearing what you're doing today because when we last spoke, you were in, I think, your first attempt at headed towards retirement. And I think you may have even said, this is it for real after X date. I'm done. I'm off to retirement. And here you are 4 years later. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing now and what has motivated you to stay in the working world instead of going off into retirement.
Well, one, I love working at Do It Best.
Yeah.
It's a
You've
great
been there
company.
For 30
years.
Okay.
June 27th was
Wow.
my 30th anniversary.
Yeah.
It even saying that aloud still kind of hits me.
Yeah.
Because when I was 26 years old in 1994, I was walking into this place on Nelson Road, being introduced to people who'd been at there 25, 30 years. And I just thought, that's crazy.
Yeah.
How could you stay at one place that long? But here's why. Because Do It Best has encouraged, stretched, and grown me. And I this wasn't passively on my part. I was actively engaged in that. I looked for opportunities to grow and to provide additional value. But I came in with a telecommunications degree. That's what got my foot in the door. Worked in video studio for 10 years.
Yep.
Then did a 90-degree shift over and worked in human resources. And for a while, I thought, wow, this is going to be my career at Do It Best. And then after 7 years in that, then I got called to serve as communications director. It's like, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'll finish out my career. Did that for 12, was going to retire.
Yep.
And then was offered an opportunity to create a brand new role and lead the Do It Best Foundation. And all of that really, and I share this with new staff, is I earned my Do It Best degree. My degree in telecommunications from Indiana University, that's what got me in the door.
Yeah.
But what got me through all those positions was not that experience from 91 to 94 at IU.
Yeah.
It was what I did on the ground, serving our members, serving each other, and showing that I was willing to take on more, do more than just what was required.
Yeah. Well, there's a quote I read recently where the person said, and this is something I should have articulated a long time ago. They said that your college degree gets you your first job, but after that, the path is pretty unpredictable and really dependent upon what you do with that first opportunity. So it sounds like you're kind of a living example of that.
I see too, sometimes there's a mindset that some have of like they're waiting to be asked.
Yeah.
Like, okay, hey, I'm good. Come promote me.
Yeah.
Put me into something.
Yeah.
None of what I did was me waiting around. Now it was, there were times where I was waiting, but I was, because I had positioned myself to be ready to be.
Well, it's like, I'm going to wait to exhibit leadership potential before somebody makes me a leader. It's like, no, you have to exhibit leadership potential and then you're put in that position. So tell us a little bit about the entity that you work for today, the Do It Best Foundation.
Yeah.
What's the origin of that organization and what does it look like today?
So Do It Best has a long history of philanthropy in the community. As a member-owned co-op, we have in each of the communities we serve. So we have our 9 warehouses across the country and here in our headquarters in Fort Wayne. But we have always been connected with our local communities, supported the chamber, got connected with the schools and civic groups. We've always done something, but oftentimes it was smaller amounts of money, but spread very broadly.
Sure.
There was not, though, in hindsight, a really clear pathway to receive that philanthropy, nor would we really be able to give a consistent explanation as to why we were supporting groups. Sometimes it was who you asked and when. Sometimes.
Yeah.
And so, but we also, the bigger thing was we knew we could do more and we could do what we were doing better.
Yeah.
And we could be serving and driving a bigger impact and creating a greater presence if we did something with more intentionality. And truthfully, you don't go into philanthropy for selfish reasons, but at the same time, if you're not getting something back as a byproduct, so staff awareness, engagement, the generation of people that are coming into the workforce today, they want to be a part of a company that is connected to community. And we didn't have a great story to tell. I mean, we had a story to tell, but it was...
So you're a really sophisticated organization, but from a charitable standpoint, not as sophisticated as you'd like to be.
And we were doing some cool, big things, but we just didn't have... We weren't able to really communicate that story well to the community as to what we were supporting and why, nor could we show our team or even more broadly to our members and our vendors, hey, this is who we are. We're a member-owned, servant-led organization. Our philosophy is serving others as we would like to be served, and yet we really couldn't concurrently share that story as to how we were addressing philanthropy. So, led by Dan Starr, our CEO, launched the Do It Best Foundation in the fall of 2019. Great time to launch a foundation right before a pandemic, right when you're getting ready to do a big fundraiser and really beef up your base, then to go into a worldwide pandemic that basically put the skids on everything.
But the organization persisted through that.
We did.
Yeah, there's a lot of organizations that started, launched in 2019 that aren't around anymore.
So we had a slow build. But that allowed us time to get some things worked out. But at the same time, it was being managed by a variety of people at Do It Best. We're holding supporting roles. And so a lot of people were thrown into the pot, but nobody was really the chef. There were a lot of people contributing, making great contributions, but there wasn't a
collective ownership, but no individual person who owned that initiative.
And even with that, it was running really well. We were distributing some big grants. We did an event called the Big Give. $150,000 went to neighborhood health, which was the seed money that got them started on their ward neighborhood health center. And that that has snowballed since. But it's kind of exciting to know that we were kind of the seed money that really gave that legitimacy to the point where it's now like thriving. And so we it's not to say we weren't doing some big things, but we knew we could do more. And so when I was presented with the opportunity, when, as you alluded, that I'd set a retirement date in January of 2023,
you had
that it would be
plan.
August of 23 was I was going to be out. But I had an opportunity to create a new role. As executive director of the Do It Best Foundation, which was just going to be a kind of a short-term thing, just to kind of, hey, I'll do one more thing. I saw it as an opportunity to help. We had my in-laws were ailing, and so there were some good reasons to extend that stay a little bit, but at the same time, it allowed me to step out of my current role because I had already helped develop the person who was going to come in, Allison Meyer, who you've had on your program, but I was like, I can't stay in this role longer. She's ready. She needs to go, and I need to get out of the way. And this was an opportunity to have a nice, clean break to do that. and just to put some full-time energy and effort into, hey, is this worth the investment on Do It Best part to put somebody in charge of the foundation and see where it goes from there.
Yeah.
And that was how things started. And then we picked up some steam and we got some early wins, and I was able to do some things that, again, I was talking to you before we started recording about, I've had a career of, thinking about turning out hit records.
Yep.
And I was having some hits in my various roles in the video studio, HR, and communications. And now I'm playing my greatest hits.
Yeah.
And there's no shame in that. There's no,
oh, sure.
I like but it's fun because I'm now in a role that calls on all those past skills, and I'm able to take those experiences and play them into a new role.
Yeah.
That also has a window of time that I have set that I'm ready to do, which is, there's something liberating in that too.
Yeah.
Is knowing that, my end is within my control.
Yeah.
And I'm going to end it before I really want to.
Yeah.
I was talking with my wife over the weekend, just because I want to make sure we continue to be on the same page with what we do next. That, boy, I could do this for another 5 years easily. I feel I've got it in me that I could do it. But at the same time, the reason I'm setting my retirement when I am is I'm ready to turn that over to somebody else and then go somewhere else, do something else, be somebody else.
Well, in the legacy piece, you and I have chatted about how much that's been on your mind, right? Because there comes a point, as you've indicated, where your goals become, it's not so much that I want to personally break new ground for me. I want to take what I've learned and synthesize that in a way that allows other people to break new ground for them. It sounds like you're at that point in your career. And there was a LinkedIn post about when you started at Do It Best, running into people who had been at Do It Best for 40 years. And at the time, when you were new to Do It Best, it was kind of like, wow, that seems impossible that someone would be at this place for 40 years. Now you're 30 years in, and you're looking back. What does that look like from 2024's perspective as opposed to 30 years ago?
Let me tell you a little bit of backstory about writing that post. At the end of April, I was going into work one day, and I had this really bad pain in my abdomen that I was going to just walk it off.
Yep.
But I got up to my desk, and some of my coworkers noticed right away I was not in good shape. And they were like, you need to go to the hospital. And I was like, no, I don't need to go to the hospital. I'll be fine.
Yeah.
And then I promptly knocked over a bottle of water all over my desk, which that was like, oh, wait a minute, something's not right. I wouldn't do that. So I followed their advice. I went to the hospital, and I ended up spending 5 days there because I had a perforated colon.
Wow.
And they had said at the time that had I not gotten in there when I did, I could easily have ended up in surgery or a much longer stay.
Jeez.
So 5 days in the hospital right before our big golf outing on round-the-clock antibiotics for something I didn't even know I had. And then all of a sudden it happens, and there I am. And so the day, it was June 27th. It was my 30th anniversary, and that day I was getting my follow-up colonoscopy.
Wow.
And I knew going in, I was either going to go get a colonoscopy and then get out, and they're like, everything's fine, we'll see you in 5 years. I was going to come out of it and be in a bed, and they're going to say, hey, we need to schedule you for surgery. Or I didn't come out of it.
Yeah.
And so before I went in, I wrote that LinkedIn post.
Oh, wow.
So that was right before.
Wow.
So I was on the cleanse, and I'm drinking the Gatorade.
Yeah, I've been there,
and you can't do anything else.
Yeah.
But my mind was clear, and I was a little scared. I was like, man, I don't want this to be the end. Yeah. Or the start of a big decline. So I wrote that post. Yeah. And I honestly, it's going to sound a little morbid, but I wrote it going, if this is the last thing I write.
Yeah. Well,
then I've done it, and I can feel good that I have, from a work standpoint, that if people think about me and they reflect back, it's like, wow, that was really cool that he wrote that before.
Yeah. Well, and it's resonated with people, I think, as a result, understandably so. So now that you know the backstory, what do you hope people will hear in that message and the message that you're trying to leave as you enter this phase of your career, maybe the last phase of your career at Do It Best?
That's what it's all about, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's that sense of purpose. And in my younger days, my ego was stroked, my cup was filled by my personal successes. That I got an attaboy, that I did something that got recognition. That really filled my cup. But as I've gotten older and maybe a little bit wiser, my cup gets filled when I'm filling other people's.
Yeah.
And as I looked in at that LinkedIn post, the people who contributed to my knowledge and experience, I listed them off, and there were many others that I didn't, but the people I did were people that, again, I was kind of thinking, like, if this is it, I want these people to know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and if you look at your impact, and it goes beyond Northeast Indiana, but you and I know some of the same people by virtue of living in the same community. There's like a Randy Rusk tree with a lot of branches.
Well, and it's taken a little while to realize, like, because I've never really thought about and it was the reaction to that LinkedIn post that just kind of had me thinking about, I know it sounds cliche, legacy, but sense of purpose. We're just like, wow, there are a lot of people who responded, and some of them even shared stories about moments where we intersected, and that they have a memory of me, of something that I said or did, that it's just kind of, it's like, wow, I actually handed my iPad over to my wife. I'm like, hey, there's some people who kind of like me a little bit. But, I think it was just because they were things that I did just because they were the right things to do, as opposed to doing them to, and that's where that shift of legacy really changed. Like, legacy, before I was thinking about this very intentional, like, leaving my mark. And the reality is, when you do good in other people's lives, that is leaving your mark. And it isn't the big production things. It's
like your legacy is built when you're not thinking about building a legacy.
Right.
It's the stuff that you just do that leaves an impact.
And the response to that post is what that really hit me. I mean, just even thinking about it right now, I'm getting a little just because it really changed my way of thinking. But it also honestly helped me get ready for whatever I do next.
Yeah.
And this kind of next step in my wife and my lives, it's intentional disruption. It is, and some of it is doing my very best to get as much set up for success for the next person, but then to get out of the way. Yeah.
Well, and I think a big piece of it too is being honest about some of the downsides of leaving a legacy and being in the same place for a long time. You being at Do It Best for 30 years, I've been at Asher for 20, and a lot of our identity is wrapped up in that. So as you look ahead to the next phase, what does that look like when it's no longer going to be Randy Rusk, Do It Best?
So the great thing about this transition in my career is that it's afforded me a little bit more breathing room. My job as communications director I was on all the time. Lots of hours. And for much of that time, I really enjoyed that. Yeah. But it also left me very little time to think about the future.
Yeah, and hard to think big picture when you have daily deadlines. Yeah.
So moving into this role, I still have very much a full-time job, but I have a little bit more breathing room to be thinking about what's next. And I started to think, like, wow, on June 27th, 2025, I really truly am stepping out of here for the last time.
Yeah.
No more extensions, no more delays. This really is going to be it. And it hit me in a way I was unexpected of, like, it put me in a bit of a funk. And I realized I've worked at Do It Best longer than my kids have been alive. I've got a 26 and a 24-year-old.
Yeah.
That's more ingrained in me.
Yeah.
And I've been married 33 years.
Yeah.
So my wife only has an edge by a few years.
Yeah.
And, it kind of be like, in a way, a divorce or a separation.
Yeah.
And so I actually sought out counseling. I ended up finding a really good counselor just to talk through, like, I need to, like, we talk about stickiness. I was sticky with Do It Best. The tentacles were intertwined, and we were Do It Best and Randy Rusk were there was a symbiotic relationship there that I started to realize, like, I'm going to have a void when I get detached from that. And the reality too of in a company as big as ours, and as there's natural turnover as people retire, and I've worked with a lot of retirees, and one of the things they always say is, I don't know anybody here anymore.
Yeah.
And they might have only been gone a year or two.
Yeah.
So I know that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And, that's a natural progression of things. But in this stage of life, you start to realize that, like, oh, wow, in a year from now, all the 30 years of stuff I've done, people may be using it, they may be interacting with it, but they don't know that it came from me or that I did it. And I will be, who's that? I remember, as an example, Don Wolf, president CEO, served for 25 years as leader of the company during its massive growth from the late 60s into early 2000s. So, I mean, he was the leader for a long time for the company. I mean, he was a big part of the growth of the company. And I was at a company event years after he retired, and another employee said, "Hey, who's that old guy?" And I was like, "Are you kidding me?" That's like Don Wolf. That is Don Wolf. But it made me realize, like,
but it hits different when it's you, right? It's a degree of humility that, I had a taste of that. Nothing like, ending a stint with an employer you've been with for 30 years. But I took my first ever 2-week vacation this summer, and I came back and the place was better off because of my absence. I was like, they're going to be fine when I leave. And that's really part of it, is saying, hey, one of the things that makes this a great place to be is that there's a lot of great people here who they might benefit from the relationship. Hopefully they learn some things from me, but they're going to be fine. They're going to find their own way.
Yeah, my time in HR really opened my eyes to that aspect, because I worked with people as they were moving into retirement where it was totally by their choice. Like, they were, in fact, it was, why are you leaving? You're at the prime, and then there were other people where they were leaving because it was time. And I always looked at it and I was like, man, I want to. There's a guy, Larry Penzinger, that I worked with, and Larry
used to be in IT years ago, correct?
He did everything. He was in marketing. He was in IT.
Okay.
He was in video production. I mean, I didn't consciously do it, but as I look back now, I followed his career path because I always admired. He made himself a utility player. Wherever you needed somebody, boy, you could put Larry in there. But when Larry left, when he retired, it was, why are you leaving? And I always thought, like, that's what I want to do. I want to be the guy who goes out maybe before everybody thinks it's time, instead of it's time. So two questions. You can answer both of them, or you can say, I'm just going to answer one and leave the other as a mystery. What do you hope to do between now and next June? What impact do you want to leave? That's question one. Question two is, what are you going to do next? I'll answer them both.
Okay.
So, because thinking about a lot of them. I want to make sure that I get someone on board and introduced to the network that I've helped build over the last year and a half, so that they can take the foundation of the foundation and really start building on that. One of the things that's been the greatest joy in my career, again, I probably realized it more after the fact, but when I left the video studio, we hired a guy named Lou Cuccinelli, who I'm sure you know. And now
Lou has been on the podcast, and we'll be doing a short cast episode where he'll be returning.
But Lou came in and completely blew up what I did. I mean, he didn't destroy it, but he came at it with a completely different way. When I left HR, Celeste Stevens came in, and Celeste is now our director of HR. But I couldn't go back into HR and go, wait a minute, what are you guys are doing? It's completely different. And then as I've stepped out of communications now, it's been a year and a half. Allison has built her own team. They're doing things very differently than I would have done. But it's great. I love it. I love like being on the consumer side of it and watch them and see her succeed. And so for me, that aspect of like making sure that I'm doing everything I can so the next person can, and so far, my record has been whoever has followed me has had a great opportunity for success.
Well, and you look at
instead of like,
yeah. Well, and you look at someone like Lou, not only did he have success at Do It Best, but now he's vice president of marketing for YMCA Greater Fort Wayne.
How great is
that? And there's
that?
other examples. I mean, people who you helped set them on a trajectory where now they're probably starting to think about the legacy they want to leave, which is a great thing. All right, so what are you going to do next?
So I've got this huge backpack full of experiences now in marketing and video production, telling stories, and I've also now had enough time on the not-for-profit side to see that I could make a big impact for some not-for-profits at the local level.
Yeah.
My wife and I plan to move to Golden, Colorado.
Okay.
We don't know that we're going to stay there, but we've lived in the same house in Fort Wayne, Indiana for 31 years. And we wanted, it may not work out.
Yeah.
We may get out there and go, oh, this isn't what we thought it was going to be.
But
and
you can always
go somewhere else. The idea though is to not find the next thing and put deep roots and then this is it. It's to we've got the luxury of whatever time that we are given to go, well, we don't have to buy a house and have a 30-year mortgage. We can Airbnb it, or we can rent an apartment, or we don't need to, our kids are out and doing their own things and everything's paid off. We can just kind of, and we squirreled away enough money that I don't want to be reach that point where it's like my time and I've got this big pile of money that I didn't ever.
Sure. And a big list of experiences that you never realized.
We just want to go out and.
So why Golden, Colorado?
Mountains.
Yeah.
And it's on the eastern side of the Rockies.
Yeah.
The western side is beautiful, but a little too remote. So there is still a practical side, even though I've kind of got this wanderlust spirit that I just described. When you ask somebody on the western side of the Rockies, where's the nearest hospital, and they point you to the regional airport, that is a hard no for me.
Yeah.
So Golden is outside of Denver. It's on the I-80 corridor. It's near the I-80 corridor.
So you have access to what you need.
You can. The things I said was access to a good hospital.
Yep.
I want to make sure I got internet access or whatever is next. And I want a grocery store that has more than one ketchup.
Okay.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's like I will still probably only buy the one kind of ketchup, but I don't want that there is ketchup. That's it. You want ketchup? It's that bottle.
Okay. All right.
I want
That's a good
to
qualifier.
know there's a couple of choices.
Yeah, and you probably then will have choices of mustard and mayonnaise.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Everything else.
Yeah.
On the western side, ketchup. That's it.
Okay, all right.
So we'll
and
go
if you
visit.
want a second ketchup, there's the airport. And
Right.
Yeah.
But the idea is that I've got all these experiences that, and again, I am justly compensated for my experience and time at Do It Best. But I'm not looking to replicate that at a small not-for-profit or a small foundation, but to do something that they would get much more value out of me than what they would be paying, because my needs will be less, and I don't need to keep building a nest egg. That's taken care of. So what can I do that I enjoy, that doesn't rob me of my free time, but also allows me to give back while making a rent payment.
So stay relevant, make an impact, have freedom and flexibility, but you're more interested at this point in making a dent in the universe than in making a larger dent in a bank account.
That's well stated.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Honestly, to the credit of the 30 years at Do It Best, the profit sharing program that we have that has afforded me the ability at what will be 57 to go, now I can work at my own terms. And again, it could be, I came from the generation of like, you have to have a track record of 5 to 7 to 10 years at a company before you can go apply somewhere else. And now I'm looking, that's just not the way today. I mean, people change jobs every year. But to go, well, maybe I do that. It doesn't really matter. Like I want to go and like, if it's working, if it's good, if I'm feeling good, if you're feeling good, if we feel like we're making a difference, then I'm going to keep doing it. If not, then maybe I'll go do something else.
So do you see yourself as either full-time or part-time with one organization or consulting to multiple, or is that all up for grabs?
I think that's all up for grabs. That's a hard thing though for me.
But that's cool. That's great.
The planner in me wants to have it all figured out. And then I keep saying, well, because seriously, we're selling everything in our house. We're selling it all, we're giving it away. And then we're packing a couple suitcases and we're hopping in our matching Subaru Foresters. And we're driving out to Colorado. And we'll have an Airbnb that we'll have pre-rented for at least a month. And then we'll see what happens.
Well, that's an amazing next chapter. That's really cool.
Intentional disruption. It scares the hell out of me, though. When I really think about it, it's like...
Well, but as I mentioned, you can always move back.
Well, that's the thing. It's like one of the great blessings of my career is to have all of it at one place. But it's also the disadvantage is you never you never do something else. I mean, I've gotten to do lots of different things at Do It Best, but it's always been Do It Best. And that's part of it too. Is like I have friends who worked at Do It Best and they don't, and they've still gone on to live great, wonderful, successful lives. It's not all about Do It Best. Although I'm like, well, what would that be like on the other side? And I know the reality is I will find some things that I like better than I did at Do It Best. There'll be a lot of things that was like, wow, Do It Best was so much better at this. And that truly is, in the not-for-profit world, one of the things I've really felt a calling for is to bring a little bit more of a business mindset to a not-for-profit world. That's been honestly the hardest adjustment for me coming into the foundation. Is everything moves at a very different pace than what I'm used to.
There's a phrase I've heard, and I'm going to botch it, but something to the effect of nonprofit is a tax status. It's not a good business strategy. So bringing a little bit of the for-profit mindset. Some of what
and this is where I think this is where I can make a difference, is in my storytelling and narrative abilities. We get grant requests in, and I look at them and I go, no, this grant's not going to, it doesn't align. And then the group will call, and I always, if you get declined from a grant, I will always sit down with you and I'll give you my honest feedback about why I think that is. And it, more often than not, when I sit down and talk with these groups, they tell me a story that's different than what they put in their grant request. And I'm like,
where was that?
That's your elevator speech, but you didn't put it in your grant request. That could have gotten a grant. And so that would be the thing, I think, is just helping people discover their stories and tell them better. We've supported some organizations where they kind of do a round robin where people just get up and they talk about their organization, and one of them is then chosen to get a donation. And so we've hosted those events in our Don Wolf Conference Center. And I know these organizations, and I'm like, oh, but you left out and you didn't say, and boy, you should have closed with. And some of it is they're insular. They're so into what they do that they kind of
forgot what the rest of us don't know.
I'll give you a great example. And this is just that this was a humbling thing for me coming into the role. Is I went into the YWCA on Decatur Road. They're now moving out to West Washington. It's going to be a wonderful facility and even better serve the needs of our community. But I walked in there and I'm kind of going, I don't smell chlorine. I wonder where their pool is. And I'm walking through these hallways and I see a lot of bedrooms and bunk beds. And the person who was giving me the tour, I'm like, so where's the health club in this? And they're like, oh, no, we're not like the YMCA. This is a domestic violence shelter. And I was like, I felt my face get really red.
Sure.
And I was like, I thought I knew what I was walking into, and kind of a little cocky walking in, like,
Yeah.
And then to go, oh, wow, I had this so wrong. That was actually a really good experience for me coming. It was one of the very first facilities that I toured in my role when I started, because then that set me on a path of, I called it my listening tour after that. It's just throwing everything out the window that I thought I knew and going in with a fresh set of eyes and ears to and I visited every organization that we had granted that year.
Yeah.
And boy, I had some things right, but I had a lot of stuff wrong.
Well, and having that moment frees you up to ask the important questions, right? Because you're not concerned with, I don't want them to think I don't know. You say, I don't know, so I better ask the most important questions. Yeah.
And that's where, again, you learn some of them were really good at telling you their mission.
Yeah.
And others, I had to discover it.
Yeah. Well, and that's maybe the next step where you can help.
Yeah. That's what excites me, honestly, because I see that as to bring a little bit of the business acumen.
Yeah.
And I realize some not-for-profits they're never, even at their greatest success, they're going to at best break even because of the nature of what they're there to serve.
Sure.
And there are organizations that are always going to be needed. Just the other day, I was talking to somebody who sits on the board for a foundation, and he said, our success is going to be measured when we have achieved so much that we've become irrelevant, that we actually have, we've reached an end of our life cycle, and we stop because we have done what we needed to do.
Yeah.
Now, that's not true of every not-for-profit. I think of Turnstone. We're always going to need a Turnstone. There, unfortunately, because of genetics and birth challenges, there are always going to be kids and families dealing and working through the challenges of disabilities. And it's great that there are organizations like that are thriving. But what a mindset to go, we want to be so successful, we render ourselves irrelevant.
We want to put ourselves out of business.
That's a pretty interesting business model.
Yeah.
But most don't think that way.
Yeah, for sure.
And I just think I can, again, I'm still a newbie at this, and I don't want to sound like I'm some sage with the not-for-profit world, but I think I can sprinkle a little bit of business knowledge and acumen, and especially in the storytelling, and help them better tell and live their missions.
Yeah, and continue to make that dent in the universe like you've been making. Yeah.
I hope to. Yeah. And I think the greatest thing for me is to look at, as I'm at the tail end of my career, my oldest daughter works for the Center for Nonviolence. So she's now in the not-for-profit world, just cutting her teeth. My other daughter is working for a doctor's office, so she's helping people who are sick. And it's just kind of like, I have to believe that the lives that my wife and I have led have influenced our children into a life of service as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's, to me, the great, because that wasn't intentional.
Sure.
It was more like what we started talking about at the beginning. It was just doing the right things.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And being good with that, and then having the benefit of hindsight now to go, oh, hey, we got more right than we got wrong.
We must have done some things right. Yeah. Well, if you're going to leave a legacy, it's a pretty good place to start. Well, Randy, thanks. You were the 4th guest on the podcast. You are the 2nd shortcast guest. So maybe whatever chapter you go into, we'll do it again. How's that?
What was our running time on this? Just out of curiosity, because I'm guessing it's way longer than we said it was
So this will be the first shortcast episode that exceeds the length of some of the normal podcast episodes, and that's okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Randy. Thank you so much for joining us again, and thanks to everyone who took the opportunity to listen to this episode of the Asher Marketing Podcast. We'll be back next time with another great guest, and we hope you'll join us then.